Brought to you by LaglessGG. Get 35% off your first purchase by using code CygnusMC or click the link below. Today I'm going to try and show you some great ways and give you some great tips on how to host your next Minecraft server for you and your friends. From how to find a good host or what hardware is best for hosting for yourself, to what server software you should use and how to configure your server for success. I'm Lunar, and in the past few months I've been deep down in the trenches of the chaotic wasteland that is the hosting sphere, talking to hosting providers, self-hosting gurus and experts, and of course that one guy from South Park. Welcome to the ultimate guide to Minecraft hosting. Let's get into it. Starting off with the most discussed question of them all, no, not RAM, should I self-host or should I rent a server? And the simple answer is, if you have the hardware, if you have the bandwidth, and most importantly, if you have the time to spend setting that up and running it, then by all means try self-hosting. It's not as hard as it might seem at first glance, and if you use something like a Ryzen class CPU, you will always get a great experience for your price. If you use that Ryzen CPU as a dedicated machine, even better, because then it can dedicate all that resources to your Create contraption. And if you take the time, it can grow into an amazing hobby that will teach you a lot about computers, just networking, hardware and software, all combined in a neat package. It's how I got my passion into server hosting, and it has been stuck with me since then. However, as someone who has self-hosted so many times, I know that there are a few drawbacks. If you're not careful and don't do research enough, you can end up breaking something that you don't know how to fix, and since you're your own support, that can be very frustrating. I'm not talking about server here, just Minecraft in general. Another consideration should be electricity consumption. Running a server 24/7 will either come up as a spike on your electricity bill, or it could just be a minor inconvenience for everyone else. And while yes, you could use something like a compact computer that will work great, those cost money compared to some of the hardware you just have laying around. But perhaps the biggest issue with self-hosting, for me at least, is time. Setting all this up, managing it, maintaining it consumes a lot of time and effort and can sometimes be really frustrating. Time you might not have. And if you find yourself not wanting to self-host, there is an option for you: going with a hosting provider. And in that case, your next question is, what hosting provider should I go with? Well, as many as you might know, I am personally affiliated with Lagless and their servers. It's literally the intro. And it will be used to showcase what it will be like on a hosting provider. So if you want to support my work, feel free to go with Lagless. My code is linked below. However, as I said, there are so many other reputable server hosts. You have Pyro, Ultra servers, Moderate servers. They all are great choices. Look for hosts that are displaying what CPU they use, have great uptime, and have good reviews. Don't just read the good ones, read the bad ones too. Google the name, see if anyone has been talking about it on Reddit, check the price, how much are they asking per gig of RAM. Anything between 4 or 2 euros per gig of RAM is actually pretty alright, especially paired to a modern Ryzen CPU or a high-tier EPYC should give you enough performance overall. If you want a great example on a bad host, you can watch my video on godlike hosting right here. If you don't intend on sharing your IP with the public, don't bother with getting a dedicated IP. Or if DDoS is available but is paid, you don't need to get it for these kind of things. It's not a deal breaker. And you can use any of the hosts I've mentioned above, and I really recommend those, and will continue to do so here, even if Lagless will have my head for it. They don't. I literally have a clause that they can't. But anyway, so you got your server. Now it's time to figure out what you actually need for that server. There is a simple flowchart you can follow when you are looking for what you need in a server. You can do this mentally, and you likely have done some of the steps already, like knowing how many players you will have and if you will use mods or not. But let's go with the flowchart with step 1, the amount of RAM you need. How many players are going to be playing? Per player, you should add more RAM, right? Makes sense. But how much more? Well, there's no real concise number. I usually calculate my RAM needs by allocating 128 megabytes per player online, rounded upwards. So that would equal to about half a gig of RAM for a server with 5 people online. Rounded up, that is 1 gig of RAM. If you run any mods, especially Crate, I usually double the amount of megabytes per player I allocate that are online. But your players aren't the only thing consuming resources. The server also needs RAM to function, and I usually recommend 2 GB for a vanilla-like server and 3 GB for any modded server software, on top of whatever value you already calculated for your players. Now keep in mind, this is not an exact science. I've had vanilla servers run fine on just 2 gigs, so don't be afraid to buy a little bit less and upgrade later. Your wallet will thank you. As for the CPU you want to look out for, as I mentioned, the most trustworthy host will display what they use. Any modern Ryzen or Intel based CPU will do nicely, and I personally try to stay away from Xeons because those just don't compete to their Intel Core offerings, and older EPYC SKUs are also not the best, while modern EPYC SKUs like Modern uses are actually pretty alright. And yes, you will feel the difference on higher end things, but for smaller servers, doesn't really matter. For disk size, I've had a few people come up to me and ask what should the disk size be. I usually find no issues with this, but if you are worried about world sizes, I'll link a great tool for you in the description. But if it gives you anything above 70 GB of disk size, you will get by for a while. Before we move on, however, a big disclaimer: using too much RAM will just kill your performance. Stop just getting 50 GB Minecraft servers. Due to how Java's JVM works, and by extension Minecraft itself, you will not see the same improvement when you went from a 10 GB server to a 20 GB server, then going from a 4 GB server to an 8 GB server. 12 GB of RAM should be only used as a maximum if you really have a heavy modded Minecraft server, and even then I find that a little bit excessive. I've run my Pebblecraft server with all of its 25 peak players online and 300 mods active on only 8 GB of RAM with almost no lag. But RAM out of the way, let's move on to the next point. What server software should you use? Now, if you have a lot of Redstone players on your server, I recommend using PaperMC.
But Lunar, don't you know that PaperMC breaks Redstone?
Yes, it did. Past tense. If you got all of that information, little Timmy, from this video from Cubic Metra, your information is outdated, as PaperMC have taken big strides in having near vanilla parity when it comes to features like Redstone. And you can read all about it here. Please read it. I don't want to get the 16 millionth comment telling me that PaperMC sucks, alright? In all seriousness though, if you want a vanilla server, of course, you can just use Fabric, which is almost vanilla. But you're missing out on essential plugins like, well, Essentials. Not to mention that you can just join a Paper server with a Fabric client, so you yourself can still run that souped up performance mod pack. Speaking of modded, it depends really. NeoForge has gained a large percentage in the modding space, and its father Forge is still a great choice, with the latter having a rather false reputation of being slower than any of the other competitors, and Neo having come a long way from their starting point as a fork. There is, however, one modding platform that towers over them when it comes to performance: Quilt. Sorry, I meant Fabric. And while I could yap your ear off about Fabric, everyone already knows what Fabric is, so let's just get to the last point: my optimization tips for you. My main tip for you here is, please pre-generate your world. This means before you start playing, you install a world generator like Chunky or Fast pre-generator and set the world border to something like 10,000 chunks, and just let generate all that chunks in the background. This means that when you start playing, all the chunks you need will already be generated, and they only need to be loaded by the server instead of calculating it all in a mathematical string, which is 10 times easier for the server and reduces early game lag significantly. This, combined with setting your server render distance to a 7 or an 8, will keep your server running silky smooth for a long while. For other optimizations, I recommend using something like the PaperMC chunk gen system Moonrise, which does multi-threaded chunk generation. And yes, you can use C2ME, it's far more popular, but in my experience, C2ME crashes a lot. Moonrise doesn't for some reason. Could just be me, but couple it with ferrite core and lithium for Fabric mod packs, and you're bound to be very okay for at least the late game. And finally, it's a little bit of a no-duh tip. Keep entities down and try to stick together. The more spread out you are, the more chunks needs to be loaded. And if you then, on top of that, have a shit ton of entities all over the place, the server needs to tick so much that it can lag. Keep chunk loaders at the minimum, and for fun, you can just limit everyone to 1 chunk loader per person, and then add some sort of a cost. There are many chunk loader mods or plugins that require the user to fuel that chunk loader in some way, which is very fun for just gameplay reasons. And with those tips, you should be armed with enough knowledge to keep your friends happy during your next 2 weeks Minecraft cycle. And finally, my most important tip to all of you, please make sure to cancel your subscriptions to these servers when you're done. I was Lunar, you were awesome, and I will see you next time. Yes, I am alive. First of all, thank you, Drowned, for editing this. This one was a little bit rough for him because he's not editing yet. I'm literally recording my voice, but yeah, this I'm rusty right now. But anyways, thank you all for watching. Thank you all for sticking here. I don't know how many of you are still sticking here, but thank you to my pebbles and thank you to my YouTube members. These people keep the server and the channel going for a long time. And yeah, for just $1 a month, you get extra access to videos, extra content, maybe some live streams. We'll see. But yeah, I just want to say thank you all for being here. And yeah, let's hope I don't disappear for some reason. Bye-bye.